Welcome to this video message on Matthew chapters 18, 19 and 20. Jesus has been explaining to his disciples that he's going up to Jerusalem to be tried and flogged and killed. And this requires a whole rethink of their expectations and values and their ideas about status. And this they learn slowly during these chapters. It begins with the disciples coming to Jesus and saying, "Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" I wonder what answer they expected. "It's you." No. So Jesus took a child and he presented the child before them. He says, "You need to become like little children. Whoever welcomes a child like this in my name welcomes me." So the idea of status was just turned on its head. Children didn't count for much in their society or in their thoughts. And here's Jesus saying, whatever you do, don't offend a child and don't despise them. Value them. Value a child. So whatever notions they had of status were just blown away by Jesus' response. And then Jesus told the story about the sheep. You know, a certain man had 100 sheep. One sheep was a stray sheep. One wanders away. So if we do the math here, there's 99 sheep, good sheep. There's one sheep, bad sheep, deviant sheep. Well, Jesus is now using numbers, so it's kind of obvious the conclusion he wants us to draw about value, isn't it? 99 is greater than 1. No, says Jesus. He leaves the 99 there and goes after the 1, even though it's 1 compared to 99, even though it's a misbehaving sheep by comparison with well-behaved sheep. And when he finds that sheep, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 who didn't go astray. And we think, oh, more. This is a lot to take in, Jesus. That the value we place on what seems obviously less valuable, less worthy of our value, the value we place on that is important to Jesus. That he says, I value what's not valued. And then he went on to talk about your brother, who could be that stray sheep. He says, your brother sins against you. Okay, so he's now separated himself and he's done wrong. So I suppose we need to go after him, don't we? Like a lost sheep. Yeah, Jesus says, you go. Don't wait for him to come to his senses. You go and see if you can win your brother. And if you can't, go again, try harder. Bring some more people with you. Do all you can to win your brother back. And only if all of those efforts are unsuccessful do you give it up as a lost case. It's not that you go after your brother just to tick the box so that you can strike him off the list with a good conscience. Go after him to win him. Go after him a second time with some help to win him. Only give up on your brother if your brother will not be responsive to your best efforts to restore him. And then Peter asked, well, how many times should I forgive my brother? Maybe 7 times? And Jesus, of course, made that famous remark, well, 70 times 7. Keep on forgiving. Just keep doing this. And then he went on to tell the parable of the king who settled the accounts. And one of his servants owed him like 10,000 talents. That's thousands of lifetimes of earnings. And he forgave him. And then that servant went out and found a fellow servant who owed him like 100 denarii. That's 100 days' wages. And that's a long time if someone has wronged you for 100 days. And so, of course, in the story, the servant grabbed his fellow servant by the throat and said, pay me what I owe you. And then the other servants who observed this were grieved and went and told the king. And he dealt very severely with the servant whom he had previously forgiven. And of course, you and I might have someone in our life who owes us 100 days of payback for their disloyalty and for their failure. They've been late again and again. They've promised to do that thing again and again, and they haven't done it again and again. And after 100 days of this, you just feel like taking them by the throat and saying, you. And we go to Jesus and we think, well, Jesus, isn't my case reasonable? And Jesus says, actually, you're the bad guy here. Me, the bad guy? I haven't been late. I've paid my dues. I've done what I said. They're the one. But Jesus says, but in this other divine relationship, you're thousands of lifetimes in debt. Just remember that. Now, when Jesus begins to talk to me about me, I hope he'll use very tender language. In that parable, the king spoke very severely to his unforgiving servant, so that whether by carrot or by stick, he would bring that servant into a place of forgiveness. But whenever we move towards someone and say, they are the bad guy, I want to walk around with a placard and their sins on the placard and tell everyone how annoying they are. And yet, how about this? How about I write my own sins on the placard and say, these are the worst sins I know. Does anyone want to come placarding? We could go on the streets, see how we get along. Each of us with our own sin on the placard. It just changes our feelings about all of this when I'm the person who has done wrong and needs forgiveness. We go on from there into chapter 19. And again, we see this notion of the reversal of values as they're commonly understood. And the Pharisees come to Jesus and says, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause at all? Now, in that society, divorce was something that husbands could do. A wife couldn't divorce her husband. They didn't even ask that question, of course, because, of course, they knew that, the husband is the one. The husband has the priority in this relationship. It's an unequal relationship as regards power. The husband marries the wife. If he's not happy, he divorces her. If he wants to marry another wife, he marries another wife. She doesn't get a lot of say in whether she should marry him or whether he will stay with her. So she doesn't have power in this relationship. And so Jesus says, it wasn't like that from the start. The two become one flesh. So any man who divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery. Whereas they'd understood that they were living in a man's world where adultery is a sin committed against a man. Adultery is where you take your neighbour's wife, or where someone comes and takes your wife where you're a man. The idea that a man could commit adultery, well, a man could commit adultery by taking someone else's wife, but the idea that adultery could be committed against my wife, that had not come up on their minds at all. So Jesus says, you commit adultery against your wife if you behave like this. And the disciples were amazed. They said, well then, it's better not to marry. Jesus said, not everyone can accept that, but some can. And so this is just an extraordinary idea. And then when Jesus had said that, it says, then they brought children to him. Maybe some of the people who are listening are beginning to get the idea that the more vulnerable people are safe with Jesus. We can bring our children. So they brought their children to Jesus, and the disciple says, no, don't want children here. So they're still not getting it. And Jesus rebuked them and says, let the children come to me. The kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And then the rich young ruler came. He says, good teacher, what thing must I do to obtain eternal life? And Jesus listens to the commandments. He says, yeah, I'm doing good on all those things. And Jesus says, if you want to be perfect now, go and sell your possessions and give to the poor and come follow me. And he said, oh dear. He had a lot of possessions and he liked them. He valued them. So we hear this idea of value is very strong in this passage. What do we value? And he valued his possessions more. And Peter then says, well, what about us? We've left everything and followed you. And Jesus says, you've followed me. And that's a value you have chosen. And you won't regret it. You will receive 100 times as much for all that you have left behind. Because when you choose me, Jesus says, when you say yes to me, you say no to other things. And I see that. You have said no to houses and family and possessions. You will receive 100 times as much, plus eternal life. So value. We've placed value on Jesus and our relationship with him. We go on then in chapter 20 and we have the parable of the vineyard. And here again, there's a lot about expectations. So the owner of the vineyard goes out early in the morning, appoints some workers and they work in the vineyard. Then he goes out at 9 a.m, which is later, appoints some more at 12 noon, and at 5 p.m, an hour before finishing time, he appoints some more workers. And the ones who'd been appointed in the morning, well, originally they had an expectation that they would receive a denarius, a regular day's wage. But when the payment begins, and the ones hard at the end were given a denarius, the ones at the start began to make this comparison in their mind, saying, oh, if they're getting a denarius for an hour, I think we're going to get pretty good pay for a whole day. And then it came to it, and they got a denarius, what they'd agreed for. And they began to contest this and compare and say, well, they did this and I did this, and so we had the hard job and the sun was hot and we worked hard, they just did a little bit, and it's not fair. And the owner of the vineyard said to them, friend. And whenever Jesus uses the word friend in Matthew's gospel, whether it's in a parable or in discourse, it's always a kind word with which to open something difficult that he has to say. Friend, I've done you no wrong. This notion of comparison and your expectations, they're not well founded. The last will be first and the first will be last. And that little saying, the last will be first and the first will be last, crops up a few times in the gospel, and it's what I might call a pericope, which means cut around. It's one of those sayings which Jesus obviously said, which was heard and remembered and passed on orally, and then became one of the phrases that Matthew wrote down when he wrote this account some 30 years later. The last will be first and the first will be last. I guess it says a great deal about the kind of values that we're seeing in these chapters. The sheep, the deviant sheep, verse 99, let's prioritise that sheep. Your brother who sins, let's really go after him. And so on. These other stories we're seeing that Jesus values what maybe we don't value. Jesus again spoke about his death to the disciples, called them aside deliberately on his way up to Jerusalem, took them aside and said, listen, we're going up to Jerusalem and the Son of Man will be killed. And after 3 days he'll rise again. So he's making it very deliberate that not only is his teaching bringing some unexpected reversal of values and expectations to them, but this is bedded down in the events that are immediately before them. This is going to happen. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up and said to Jesus, I have a request. He said, what is it? She said, grant that in your kingdom these 2 sons of mine will sit, one on your left and one on your right. Jesus said, can they drink the cup I'm going to drink? They said, oh yeah. Jesus says, well, you may drink the cup, but it's not mine to give you that. So here she comes on her son's behalf, again looking for status. Can we have like the extra important seats? And when Jesus doesn't comply with her request, then the other 10 disciples become indignant against the 2. So it flips over and they begin saying, oh, you thought you're better than us. And it's one of these rare occasions where there's argument that's recorded among the disciples. But again, of course, they're picking up the wrong end of the stick, and that they're chiding their brothers for wanting to be superior to them. And Jesus says, look, whoever wants to be greatest among you, let him become your servant. And into this environment of arguing, you might say this is not a very promising situation. Here's the disciples arguing. But into that situation comes a word from Jesus, which is perhaps the summary of the entire Gospel of Matthew in a single line. He says, even the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So this articulation of his mission came in this unusual setting, and give his life as a ransom. I mean, when you give a ransom, it's because you value what you're going to get more than the ransom. Let's say your car gets clamped and you have to pay 120 euro to have the clamp removed. You think, that's a lot of money. But then it's my car. My car's worth more. And so you pay the money because you value your car. But if the fine was like 10,000 euro, you might say, oh, they're welcome to it. They can keep the car because I value the 10,000 euro that I don't have more than the car because it's not worth that. So Jesus, when he talks about giving his life as a ransom for many, he's talking about valuing us, valuing sinners above his own life. I mean, there's a psalm in the Old Testament, thy loving kindness is better than life. And when you say something is better than life, you are placing, I guess, the highest value that you possibly can place on that thing. And here's Jesus saying that he's going to give his life as a ransom. So again, it's such a reversal of values, as you would say. Jesus, no. Even though we're the 99 and you're the 1 in terms of numbers, your life is so much more valuable than ours that for you to give yourself the ransom doesn't make sense. But this is Jesus. This is God who loves the world. And so as they went on and were passing out of Jericho, the 2 blind men called out to Jesus and said, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on us. And that phrase, of course, Son of David, is all about expectations. Expectations of the restoration of the kingdom of David from the past with all its glories, and the new kingdom of the Son of David, who would be fierce in the pursuit of righteousness and meekness. And so there they are calling, Son of David. And of course the crowd following what Jesus telling them, be quiet, be quiet. Again, not valuing these 2 blind men. You're blind men. You don't have a lot to contribute. You're not offering money, are you? So just be quiet. We've got something going on here. We're on our way with Jesus. Places to go, people to see. Why would you be important? So the crowd were saying, no, we don't value you. Please stop calling. And again they called Son of David. And Jesus hears that expectation that they have, based not on their status, based not on their wealth, based not on what they can give or how they can compare themselves favourably with someone else. He hears that and he responds to it, and he calls them over and he says, what would you like me to do for you? Which was very honouring of them, wasn't it? They said, we'd like to receive our sight. So he touched them and gave them their sight, and they followed him on the road. And here again we see Jesus valuing them, and it says he was moved with compassion. He wasn't persuaded by their status. He wasn't persuaded by their wealth. He was moved with compassion. It wasn't something in them that drew him to them. It was, they called out to something that was in him, the Son of David, the one who cares for the poor. God so loved the world that he gave. Not, oh, the world was so important that God gave his son. No, it's God was going to get such a reward that he gave his son. No, God so loved the world. It's something moves out from the heart of God to give grace to the person who needs it. And we see that in these chapters. And this is the teaching that comes through these chapters. This sense of the way God values people who regard themselves maybe as not valuable. Or if the math is done, it seems that maybe God's making the wrong choice. 1 versus 99 and so on. But Jesus is moved with compassion and expressing the heart that's in him. It brings honour to the God of love that he acts like that. And he calls us to act like that too.